Good morning, on-purposers. Give yourself a pat on the back because you are right here, right now for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we'll empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose. How you doing this morning, Jared?
Great morning. Sun's shining. The top's off the Jeep. We got some coffee, and now we're going to connect with our listeners and really get after some stuff. I'm very grateful for all of you that have been following our journey and listening to us and taking part in your purposeful practice, and for bearing with us as we made a few changes to make sure we're bringing you guys the best listening and viewing experience possible. And now that we've made those changes, we are ready to get going full speed ahead, and we hope you're on board for the journey.
Yeah, a little adversity, a little growth every day. Every day is happening on our end, doing the purposeful practice in the podcast and out of the podcast. So it was a good learning experience. So we have an exciting topic today. The title of this podcast is Expression versus Suppression. When do we know when it's the right time to express ourselves, be vulnerable, really share our feelings? And when is it maybe better to keep things to ourselves, to not show your hand, and to suppress some of those emotions? So, jumping in, let's keep it pretty general, Jared. What do you think? What do you do typically? Would you consider yourself more expressive, more suppressing of sharing your feelings, ideas, beliefs, emotions? Where are you at on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think it changes over time. I think right now I'm in a very expressive state. I think that's one of the positives that I see in our current world, and some of the good changes that's taking place is you have so many mediums now to express yourself. Personal conversations, social media can be very expressive, YouTube, all the ways to really get your thoughts, ideas, and emotions out there. So I probably always veer to the expressive side, but not always in the best manner. What about you? Where do you think you fall on this?
For sure, expression. For sure, expressive side. And I'm trying to be a little bit more effective on when to suppress some of these feelings, ideas, because it can be effective. I think you're right when it kind of depends on the situation and the time.
So what are you basing then your decision to either be expressive, or maybe I'll hold back on this one, maybe it's not the right time? What is the basis for that decision point there? For me, I'll tell you, it always goes back to the relationship, right? If there's a relationship that has solid foundation, mutual interest, like I know the person, I'm more likely to express than suppress. But if it's somebody new, I'm not sure how they're going to take this. I'm not sure that it's going to be productive in the long run. I'll probably suppress it. So for me, that's kind of the key, is what relationship do we have? Is it business? Is it personal? Is it long-term? Is it a short-term? Is this a one-off? Like, I met you one time and our paths will probably never cross again. Well, for me, then I probably don't need to express everything. Whereas with somebody that is going to be in my life forever, suppressing feelings generally will hinder that relationship because it's long-term.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It is the relationship, and I'm trying to even think of social media as a relationship, right? The relationship that you have with your community, with your followers. And in that sense, I tend to stay pretty expressive in the moment, a lot with the stories and things like that. But for sure in the relationship, new relationships, I definitely exercise more suppression. Kind of feeling people out, don't want to do too much, show too much of who I am right away, sometimes depending on the environment. But I think overall, I have leaned more towards expression, and it served me well to just be real, be expressive of how you're feeling. However, one thing I would like to note is that they say, what is that saying, that distance makes the heart grow fonder.
Yep.
Distance makes the heart grow fonder, and you need to allow space and time, and not always communicating, expressing how you're feeling all the time, in order for the other person on the other side of the relationship to really like think and have that space. I think space is really important. Maybe not necessarily suppression, but having that space in between high moments of expression, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people will get confused on the difference between expression or suppression and timing. So I want to get you. You're a very well timed person. Watching what you're doing, all the different relationships you manage, you seem to really be cognizant of when's the right time to do something. When maybe should I pull back? So what is it that you use to help you decide if now's the right time? Because you don't always have to express everything immediately when it comes to your mind, which I think is sometimes where people get in trouble. And for sure, when I was younger, I did. Because if I had a thought, I was just going to tell you, and then your job was to deal with it, and I was going on my way. And what I found was that really hindered my relationships. Because, I'd always kind of told people, well, I'm just brutally honest. I wasn't brutally honest. I was an asshole. Right? Because I could be brutally honest in a much more effective way, being aware of timing, the relationship, the implications. And I think that went back to just starting to really study communication and learn that communication isn't about what I say, it's about what you hear. So how do you have any tips, or what are you doing as a millennial now, a younger generation that's really starting to come into their own as far as expressing their wants and desires in the workplace, in the world, what they want to see from their politicians, their government leaders? How do you kind of decide your timing of things?
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, just awareness of the relationship. I tend to use mirroring. So if somebody is being very expressive, I feel, and this is just general practice. Every situation is unique, but typically, if someone's a very expressive person, then I'll be very expressive with them. If it's more of an introverted person that doesn't show much and maybe expresses themselves in subtle ways, I tend to do that too. I find mirroring is very effective in anything, even in conversation. You'll find that you pick up. You'll catch me with my Texas boys. You hear a little slang come out. Just literally mirroring people's movements, voices, things like that. And mirroring how expressive they are with their emotions, I find is very effective too. So mirroring is definitely a technique that I like to use, and really awareness of the relationship. Now that we're getting into this topic, I'm like, man, this can get pretty deep. This can get pretty deep as far as like when to be more expressive and when to suppress.
Right, and remember, the balance of expressing or suppressing really comes back to effective communication, right? Because if I misread it and I think we're at a place where I can tell you, hey, this is, I don't think you did this well, and I need to see you improve here, and your view is we're not at that place, and it causes a spiral in your performance, right? As a coach, I'm always looking for that timing piece, right? If you come into the gym and your head's down and you're slow to walk in, I'm watching nonverbal cues, right? How slow are you to get on the mat? During the warm-up, are you looking like you're already beat up? Is your shoulder hurting and stuff? Well, that's probably not the time to start getting on you and be like, let's go, we need 120%, you got to go right now. So I need to be able to pull back and be like, okay, right now it's probably a time to nurture. Hey, dude, I know you're banged up. Let's get through this workout. We're going to tailor things for you. We're going to make sure you're successful, blah, blah, right? Versus the other time, you come running in the door and you already got your wraps on and you're ready to go. Well, now I can match that energy. It's kind of like you said, mirroring a little bit. And the gym's an easy one because it's physical, right? I see you guys come in the doors. I watch as you come in. I'll read the body language, and then I'll kind of know how hard that practice is going to be. Do I need to get on you and make you dig deep, or is this a time where I need to pull back and kind of nurture you a little bit and help you believe without damaging your body? And I think our communications and our relationships are all the same. Paying attention to the nonverbal cues, the body language, is a big factor in deciding, especially if you know what you need to communicate about may not be taken as a positive for them, right? Whether you're giving critical feedback to an employee, maybe you're talking with your intimate partner or spouse, whatever, about something that hasn't gone right at the house. And for me, it's interesting. Probably the place I've learned the most about expressing or suppressing and kind of removing the feelings and analyzing has been in our discussions around money. I would say that I think if our listeners, maybe we'll throw a poll up on that about listeners, how many discussions and conversations they get into about money that end up in a very, I would say, negative or a highly confrontational light. And I think it's because we don't pay attention to the feelings associated with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even somebody hanging their head low and not being verbally expressive, that's still expression.
It's all expression.
It's still expression of their body language, and I think that's something we tend to forget. What are some examples of when you've had success with being very expressive and when you've had success with using suppression?
I think, honestly, that my expressive success is what you guys are seeing. Just taking the risk to create the vlogs and create a podcast and partner. You know, the fact I went to lunch with you and was like, hey, dude, I have an idea for a podcast. I want you to be part of it. Here's where I see it going. Are you in?
Yeah, that was big.
You know what I mean? That was expression. And I wasn't sure. And that was an interesting one because we had one relationship that was going to morph into another. And I wasn't sure how you were going to respond. But to me, it was worth the risk of potentially you being like no and it affecting the first relationship because I saw what was possible. So I think right now I'm probably at my most expressive in my life because of the changes I've made, the impact I want to create, and the life I want to live. So I would say right now is probably my most effective state of communication. What about you?
I would say the same. With expression. I have found in my business relationships, especially, pays dividends to be very expressive and to not let things fester, to really be like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I feel like you're not pulling your weight here, or hey, I feel like I'm not doing a good job here. What do you think? You know, and really just being real in business, I feel like has paid dividends. Now in my personal relationships, specifically romantic relationships, I have found, like with one of my partners, when it's opposite, right, who was someone who's not as expressive, I have found that suppressing has been effective too, of just not digging too deep, not asking too many questions, and just letting her kind of like express herself when she's ready, as opposed to being like, well, how are you feeling? Why are you feeling this way? And trying to dig deeper, just kind of like pumping the brakes and giving her that space. I have found that has been more effective than me really trying to get to the answer.
Sure.
and finding out like what's causing these emotions.
Yeah, and I would say for me, suppressing has been most effective with my teenagers. Right, and I think back to my oldest is, she's 6 years older than her brother, and I think I expressed a lot more of my frustration. And those of you that are raising teenagers in our audience, I think will understand, like, teenagers are very frustrating for parents because it's the first time that they're adults, really, and they're making their own decisions, and you don't get to control a lot of it. So for a lot of parents, giving that up and then seeing them not, I don't want to say be successful, but just you have an idea of, when the kid's little, you have an idea of what they're going to do and what you hope is possible for them. And then as a teenager, we all stumble. We all do dumb things. We all make mistakes. And as a parent, it's hard not to be emotionally like, you're better than that. You know better. And what I've found, and I know for sure, if you came at me with a ton of emotion, I probably wasn't responding well. And I think we probably made that mistake with my oldest daughter of not being really mindful of how the emotions play into the communication, especially with a teenager who's going through all their own hormonal changes. The last thing they need is us throwing emotion on them. So I would say probably the most effective place I have for suppressing some of my thoughts and really deciding when's the right time to talk about something, maybe when's the time to just let it go, is with my teenagers.
That makes sense. Yeah. More analyze and kind of see what.
It's such a crazy time.
Yeah.
Right.
Emotions.
And if you think back to when you're a teenager, you're literally like a dynamite keg just wanting to blow up, especially for the males, right? The testosterone's pumping. You got this primal drive for females for the first time in your life. Like you don't know how to process all this. You don't know necessarily where you fit in the world. The last thing you need is dad throwing emotion on you. That's just like spraying the. Yeah, exactly. And so for me, and it's interesting, right? Because I've really been cognizant of, okay, my son, my daughter are doing stuff that I don't think this is the best, but it's your journey, so I'm going to pull back and kind of let you see it. So I suppress with them, but then on the flip side, me and my wife have to be very expressive so that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Right? So we have, us two have to have the discussions that maybe we should have that we want to have with the kids, but we know it's just going to blow things up. So it's an interesting, because it's the same problem, but in one group I'm going to express, and the other I'm going to hold back and see if there's a better time for it.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense as a leader, as a coach, to have to use a lot of suppression, because you're the leader, you're the coach. Obviously, you're going to have the answers in certain areas, but in order to effectively lead and coach, you're going to have to suppress being like, no, that's not how you do it, right? And having these emotions around that journey of knowing where they need to go and helping coach instead of really micromanage.
Yeah, micromanage is a good word. And I think the other thing is tolerance, right? And I think that's where we struggle in the world today, is tolerance. And it's ironic because we have more information available to us. Meditation is finally getting mainstream attention, journaling, all this self-help. But then on the flip side, if you disagree with my opinion, I kind of come at you. And so a little bit of tolerance, and that I wasn't a teenager in 2019. Yeah. So even my view of what I think my kids should be doing might be wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And if I impose my will on them, I believe that stunts their growth. That stunts their decision making. Sometimes you got to figure out that the stovetop is hot by burning your hand. I can tell you all your life. But until you burn your hand, you really don't know. And I think that's the same in business and in coaching is, if my communication, if I express so much that I'm always giving you answers and I'm always telling you, hey, here's the problem, here's how you solve it, well, I'm really stunting your growth. And especially if you're an employee and I'm paying you, I want you deciding that. I want you to take on ownership of whatever job you have. That's what I brought you in for. If I was going to solve all those problems myself, I really don't need that position.
Yeah, I think tolerance is a great concept to bring into the conversation, because suppression and tolerance go together, and we need more tolerance. And I think that when you are tolerating, you can suppress ideas and emotions, right? There's no, Dale Carnegie, one of my favorite books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, classic. The first principle in there is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Period. And criticize is different than evaluate, right? Evaluating somebody is different than criticizing somebody. I think that expression, and this is just for me personally, if there's one thing I want my listeners to take away from this podcast, is I believe expression of yourself, of your true thoughts, feelings and even like the goofiness, right? Like I really love exercising that muscle of expression with like making goofy faces, goofy voices, just expressing myself in the moment. I think is one of the healthiest things you can do, and I think we fear that because there's not enough tolerance. People talk shit, oh, that was dumb, or like what an idiot, or whatever, and we don't have tolerance for real raw authenticity because we're put in these structures. You're supposed to act this way. You're supposed to be, well dressed and professional, and you can't make you can't stray from these blueprints of society that we have, even from the way that you should live your life. Go to school, get an education, get married, get a home, make sure that your kids do the same. To where we're not encouraged to express things that are out of our blueprint. So if there's one thing that I want our listeners to take away is express yourself, is to really express yourself and be fearless in the expression, because that's where I have seen in my experience a lot of positive feedback of people being, man, I love that. I can relate. I feel the same way. Or you inspired me to be a goofy ass and do stuff. It feels good. And to express. Overall, I think you should express more than you suppress.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas our listeners can really check in on their life, is if your circle that you spend all your time with, you feel the need to suppress all the time because they're not going to accept it. They're extremely defensive. They're not open to maybe a new way, new ideas, or just even understanding how you feel. You really need to change that circle, right? Because you need to be around people like you can express, and I can go, hey, dude, I didn't really like that one, but whatever, right? But it is not, but you're allowed to be you. And I think that's a little kind of what you were hitting on, is we have so many places where we're not really ourselves. We're our fake selves, or our best self. We got all these filters and stuff. And I think a lot of that streams over into our life. We put up all these filters, and that is suppression, right? Think about, what is a filter? A filter, if I put a picture of a filter and it shows me beautifully tan, but I haven't been in the sun, I'm suppressing the fact that I haven't been in the sun. If I have a filter that shows me having abs, but I don't really have abs, well, I'm suppressing the fact that I know I haven't been working out and doing what I'm doing. So I think we got to be cognizant of that communication is verbal. Communication is also nonverbal. And the nonverbal things that we allow in our lives can really affect that stuff. And I think you hit on something that I want to make sure we clarify for people is don't criticize. It's not the same as don't be honest with people. Especially if you're in a position, if we have some entrepreneurs on here and some business people, I can evaluate you all day long, right? Because evaluation is a performance. I evaluate performance. I evaluate your product. I evaluate your results. Criticism is attacking the person. I think there's a big difference, right? Attacking the person versus talking about the performance is two different things. And I will absolutely 100%, I've talked to you about it. Performance, we will talk about. We will look to improve, because if we're in a position where we get to talk about your performance, my performance, our team's performance, that means the communication foundation is based on mutual success. And you're in a position you want to be successful. So my job is to have difficult conversations and maybe talk about areas you need to improve, things you didn't do well, so that we move forward. However, it doesn't mean I attack the person. And I think that's where people get confused, is even especially like on some of the political topics I see going around and some of the more controversial things that people want to discuss, is they forget about the issue or the topic to make their point, and they start going after the person. And that's unfair, right? You're criticizing the person, not the topic. And I want us to grow past that, especially in this community. This is a place where we can agree to disagree. We're not all the same, nor should we all be the same. There's a great quote that I've heard, and I can't remember who said it, but basically in any relationships, if you agree with everything, or if we agree with everything all the time, there's no need for both of us. Right? Like you think about, like, if you and I don't have disagreements, the podcast doesn't move forward.
Right.
If we don't have creative, like, hey, I want to try this, I'm not sure about this, like, we don't grow. If we just sit in and we're like, hey, let's keep doing the same thing we did every day all the time, well, that's not going to move forward, right? You have to be able to talk honestly and openly and have an idea of where you want to go, and at the same point nurture a personal relationship behind it so that you want to take that risk. You feel comfortable taking that risk because you know if we fall flat on our faces, we're both going to be like, oh, that sucked, let's not do it again. And I want people to seek those kind of relationships in your life. Seek relationships where you're allowed to be you. You're allowed to fail, and those people will help pick you up, because when you fail, you will learn and you will grow. If you do the same things all the time, then that's all you're going to have.
Yeah, that comfort zone is not the zone of growth. There's no growth in the comfort zone.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you will never grow continuing to do the same things. And I think that's huge in your expression and suppression. If you are way on one or the other, either you express everything that comes to the top of your mind with no filter, that's going to hinder you. On the flip side, if you don't ever tell anybody anything and you hold it all in, that will hinder you. Like, you got to have a balance in there. And I think if you're listening to us and you're one way or the other, let's start being more aware of that, and let's look at how do we improve.
Yeah. So I do disagree with you on one point. I do believe that depending on where you're at, if you express yourself with no filter, no nothing, that'll help you grow. That'll help you grow. There may be some consequences. There may be some consequences, but if you're a person who's not used to expressing yourself and you start expressing yourself even with no filter, just going, you're going to grow.
Yeah, and let me clarify. So no filter, what I mean by that is maybe no filter wasn't the right term, no concern for how you're going to feel, which is the mistake I made.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, if I'm going to tell you and you deal with how you feel. And that wasn't good for me either. So that, maybe filter wasn't the right word, but I do think, like, sometimes, and I guess that's how I look at, do I express or suppress, as kind of that risk reward. Is this a time, if what I think I need to share right now, what is the reward of this conversation? Is the risk greater? Especially if it's a new type relationship. It's somebody I don't know super well. Maybe it's a new student at the gym. It's a new business partnership we're looking at. I have to look at that. And I think it's okay to be calculated.
Yeah.
And do I express or suppress?
Yeah.
But here's what I won't say. I won't be in a relationship where I always have to do one or the other. I want the option to be both. I want to be balanced, right? And we talked about this the other day. If you're in relationships where everybody sits and you're always the one carrying the load, that gets exhausting. But on the flip side, if I'm in a relationship where I'm not even allowed to speak, well, that's not, like, I don't want to be there either.
Right. No, it's a balance for sure. So overall, I think that there's arguments for both sides. But Jared, let's leave our listeners with maybe your opinion of is there a right way, is there a wrong way, and maybe where you lean more towards. Like, what would you say would be the all-encompassing takeaway that you would want to give from your perspective to our listeners of expression versus suppression?
Yeah, I would say, man, I was thinking about this. I would say I'm probably going to be about 80-20 express.
Nice.
And I think, to me, that's a good ratio, because it means I'm cognizant and aware that I may not need to say everything all the time, and I'll hold it for the right moment, especially on relationships, especially like if somebody's the opposite of me. If they're just completely expressive with no balance on, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Well, then I'm going to look at them and know, okay, if I match them, if I express all the time they're expressing, especially if it's something that's confrontational or that maybe isn't the best news, that's like emotional fire, right? That's like gas on the fire. So on them, I'm going to be more calculated, and I'll watch for the timing to express. But for the most part, I will be expressive, because I think that's how you process stuff, especially trauma. especially the days I don't feel good, if I have doubts, if I'm not sure what I'm doing, if I'm struggling a little bit mentally. I found that being expressive on those days moves me through it.
Ooh, that's good.
Versus suppressing. So I think, for a lot of you guys, maybe this is the first time into the podcast and On Purpose community is that self-awareness we've talked about earlier. Take an inventory. Where am I at? Will be a good guide on how you communicate.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm in that same realm. I'm in that same realm to where 80-20, maybe even a little more, maybe 85-15, 90-10 on that expressive side. I'm really, really pushing for the expressing, because even if it has what some would perceive as a negative consequence, you're going to grow from it, right? Like if there's anything you're going to notice from this podcast is that we're really pushing for you to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that is where the growth is. And I think that truly expressing yourself, you get feedback and you get growth from that, and the consequences are minimal in comparison to the growth. I mean, look at the President of the United States. We have him on film saying, grab her by the pussy and blah, blah, and all this crazy stuff that he's expressed, and he's yet the most powerful man in the free world. And I think that a big part of that has been because of his radical expression. Not, maybe you don't agree, but one thing that we can all agree on is that the President of the United States right now has expressed a lot of things, whether or not you agree with him, has been an expressive person. And we can see people at the top of their game, celebrities, Conor McGregor, right? Extremely expressive. May not be the best MMA fighter, may not be one of the most top skilled, but even in every category business, it's mainly the expressive people who get the most feedback, who get the most growth. And I think that there's something to say for that. So for me, I would say express yourself. And we have the most opportune time in history right now. We're speaking to you guys through a cell phone. We're expressing ourselves through a podcast. You can hop on any platform and practice your expression without too much consequence. Even if you're afraid of getting in front of the camera and showing your face, put your real thoughts in a tweet, in a post. Express yourself. See kind of what feedback you get, and you're going to grow from that. Even if it's all negative feedback, putting yourself out there, expressing yourself does result in growth. Especially if it's something that you're nervous to express yourself. Like Jared was saying, the trauma, the darkness. I always hear people saying like, "Oh well, I go to my dark place and dark this and dark that." Turn on the light. Turn on the light. What's in the dark room? Put the flashlight on it. What's going on in the darkness? And you'll find that when you go to that dark place and you start talking about your darkness, that's when you get some of the biggest returns, the biggest gain, the biggest growth. So express yourself, especially on the things that you feel uncomfortable, might be in the dark, that you feel you maybe shouldn't experiment with that.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, that dark space, that dark place is because they feel alone and it isolates. But I will tell you, when you share that you're in that spot, you share that, man, things aren't going right, I'm struggling with this, you're going to find that room is full of people. Because there's a bunch of other people going through with you. And then you start to be able to process out of it. And if you're in charge of people, if you're going to lead people, if you're going to really truly live the life you want to have, you're going to have to express, right? If you look at all the leaders in the world, sports, politics, whatever, they're very expressive. And sometimes, some people are going to love them, others are going to hate them. But at least you know where they stand on things. At least you know that they're up to something.
Yeah.
If you keep it all in, I can't even make a decision on whether I want to support you or not, because I don't truly know where you stand.
Right, and there's different ways to express yourself to where it doesn't have to be like this. You don't have to be an on-camera person. It could be through art. You can express yourself and never say a single word. You can be mimes? You can express yourself in any way that you feel comfortable expressing yourself. The point is express yourself.
Yep, get it out. Writing, journaling, poetry, yoga. I mean, there's so many ways to truly become yourself, but I think it's important that we really look at the relationship we're around. Are they allowing us to grow? Are we allowed to express? Or are we being kind of kept in our box? Take inventory of that. And then also be very aware of where you are in your life, mentally, physically, spiritually. Are you truly expressing and processing all the ups and downs of life? Or are you always suppressing? And find that balance point. It may not be 80-20 for you. For me, that really works. All these probably a little more expressive and a little less suppressive, but I think that's part of the relationships we have. He's single, chasing his dreams on his own right now with good support around him. I have teenagers at home. I have an early 20s that I need to balance those relationships. So for me, 80-20 works, but it doesn't happen if I don't pay attention to it. And that constant growth, that constant awareness of mindset and the relationships I'm in and how they're developing and nurturing.
Yeah. Yeah, some good stuff. So let's hop into our purposeful practice. And speaking of expression, Jared and I have been discussing the purposeful practice piece. For those of you who have been with us since the earlier episodes, it used to be called homework, but we changed the name to take away that connotation, because nobody's ever been like, yes, homework, right? So now it's practice. We can get excited about going to practice because we know we're going there to get better, have a good time, but also grow. And we've been talking about potentially adding some excitement to the pieces of practice, of doing so. I know I had kind of a silly idea that we're not going to go with, but even like tying in an MMA piece, like what if we had like a heavy bag in here and we're like, did something physical for the video piece. So in your responses in the purposeful practice, please include stuff that you may want to see, may want to hear, potential topics you want us to speak about, and ways that we can improve. Because again, we're on this journey with you. We're looking to live our lives with more passion and purpose. And if you can give us some suggestions, I think that would really help, because this is an open dialogue relationship here that we have going. So jumping into the practice, we have piece 1. Do you generally express or suppress your feelings, ideas, beliefs, dreams, goals? Where are you at on that spectrum? Piece 2, in your experience, what has produced better results for you? Expression or suppression? And then the most important piece, send in your practice to us at onpurpose.official@gmail.com.
Awesome. Team, we're on episode 20 today. That means we are not going anywhere. Ali and I and Jill in the background are committed to bringing you guys the best, most purposeful podcast to help you find that purpose in your life. So participate, jump in with us, send us your thoughts, comments, questions. You can find both of us. We're heavy on social media, Purpose Podcast on Instagram's up and running. So let's really get the most out of this relationship and grow together. So I want to thank you guys for being with us. We do have our first on Purpose workshop coming up October 19th here in Fort Collins, Colorado. We'll be sending out an Eventbrite stuff on our social media. It's going to require you to register so that we can keep count. We'll limit it to 20 people because this will be a good 4 hours. It's going to go from 8 in the morning until noon. You're going to leave with a blueprint to create the most purposeful life you can in your own terms, not ours, and really set the stage for what we expect to be a great 2020 for many of us. So I want to thank you all for being here. Ali, I want to tell you I appreciate you, and I love your energy and passion you bring to everybody in your life. And for the rest of you out there, get that practice in. Let's get moving forward. So I want to thank you all for being here. And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose.